decided to dive into recreating Stevie Wonder's Superstition bass, and we're going to do it on the Moog IIIc. This is the first time I've ever done a breakdown on the big Moog, and I'm sure you can follow it. It's not a complex patch, but you need to patch everything on the Moog. So you're going to see chords, and I'm going to walk you through it, but there's a special sound to this Moog that isn't quite the same on any other synthesizer, including the Minimoog. And according to Robert Margouleff, who we interviewed, he was clear that there was no Minimoog in T.O.N.T.O. So all of the Stevie Wonder records, the 4 records, the classic period of Stevie Wonder,
Right.
is there a Minimoog?
No.
There's not one Minimoog?
Not one Minimoog. Just the Maxi Moog.
But Stevie didn't play a Minimoog on the 4 classic
No Minimoog.
records?
No.
Talking Book, Intervisions?
No.
Okay, okay. Please remember to like and subscribe to our channel. It really means a lot to us, and we've noticed that not everybody that's watching the videos has subscribed yet. Now is a perfect time. Just stop for a second, do it. It's one thing you could do for us that would really help us, and it means a lot to me and my team, and we put a lot of our heart and soul into these videos, so please give back in that way to us. And now let's get into it. We're going to do Stevie Wonder's Superstition bass on the Moog IIIc. So let's bring it in and take a really close look at the Moog IIIc, and we're going to break down Stevie Wonder's Superstition bass. And I did build this as a very simple sound, so I'll prove that it is. There are a lot of patch chords involved on the Moog because you kind of have to patch everything. There's not a lot of normals, although there are a few. So I'll point those out. So come on in, let's start with the oscillators right in this section. So you can see we have oscillator 1, oscillator 2, and oscillator 3, and then something next to them. This is an oscillator driver. So the oscillator driver basically controls the pitch of all 3 oscillators, and then the frequencies of the individual oscillators act as a fine tune for that oscillator. The pitch settings on the oscillators are all set to 32 foot because I want there to be all the oscillators down on the lowest note, and I'm only using 2 of them. So if we come on in, you can take a quick look at the range controls on the first oscillator and the second oscillator. They're set for 32 foot. Also, there's a slight difference between the waveforms that I chose. I'm using a sawtooth waveform from oscillator 1 and a rectangle wave from oscillator 2, and I set the pulse width right here of the rectangular wave from oscillator 2 so that it's perfectly square. Let's see if we can hear that. So I'm going to solo it, and you can hear the difference. These would be pulse waves. See, right there I get it square, and that's what I like. So the next step is to take the oscillators into a mixer, because I want to get 2 oscillators into 1 filter, and the only way to do that on the Moog is to go from 2 to 1. So the mixer does that, and let's bring you guys in again. Here's the mixer, and the sawtooth from oscillator 1 is going into the first channel of the mixer. The rectangular wave from oscillator 2 is going into the second channel of the mixer, and I have them both cranked. Now these are very hot mixers and they saturate a lot. I'm going for 10. Once you get past this number 7, you start getting a lot of saturation, and that's what I want for this bass sound. Let's see if we can hear the difference. Here's oscillator 1. So you hear a little bit. Without saturation, with saturation. Oscillator 2 without saturation. Nice square wave. Oscillator 2 with it. Now it's going to build up. When I add the other oscillator, now I'm really driving the mixer into this output, this master gain output. Let's see if we can drive that harder too. Now you hear it breaking up. So there's a clear difference there. So basically on the Moog, every little thing adds up. So we look for subtle differences and places where I can add color to the sound as we go. So let's take a look again, a little closer look to see that there's a patch chord right here in the 3rd input of the mixer, and it's coming from a sine wave output that's on oscillator 1 as well. And what this is doing is adding some fundamental that's not at a different frequency. So I'll let you hear what that sounds like. Here's the low E flat. And now I'm adding sine wave from from oscillator 1. How thin, how fat, how thin, how fat. So more boom on the bottom. And I have a patch cord in here because I was considering using oscillator 3, but I'm not using it. So it was there in case I needed it. So for purposes of clarity, there are only 3 inputs into the mixer. On to the next step, right? Output of the mixer now. Where does that go? The simple chain, pitch, timbre, duration, amplitude. So this is our pitch section, and a little bit of timbre is coming from our choice of waveforms, and we go into the input of the filter. So here's the voltage controlled low pass filter. On this Moog, the oscillators are down here on this row for the most part, and then there's an output mixer. The top row has our filters, right? We have a fixed filter bank, a high pass filter, a filter coupler so we can get band pass and notch filters, and a low pass filter. And then the VCAs. That takes care of the second row, right? That's our bottom row. This is our second row or second story. And we won't talk about the top section in this video, but we'll save that for other videos because we're going to do some fun stuff with the sequencer in other videos. So let's bring it in close and see what's going on the low pass filter. So in the low pass filter, we have the output, if you look down here, from the mixer. So I'm going to go down to the mixer, take the output of the mixer, follow it up to the input of the low pass filter, and now we can examine what's going on in the filter. The initial filter frequency, which is the cutoff frequency, is down to 0. I have a frequency range, which is going to control how much control the envelope generator is going to have on the filter. And the regeneration control is just like resonance or emphasis. So we have it set to 7. So let's go down to the keyboard, and when you hear this sound, there's resonance. Now here's no resonance. Resonance. So a little more personality. Here's a lot. Get that wow sound. So I'm setting it where I continue to have bass and just a little bit of personality. Now we've demonstrated a chain that goes from the oscillators to the mixer to the voltage controlled filter. Next destination, pitch, timbre, duration, amplitude. We go to the VCA, and we'll take a look at the signal path coming from the voltage controlled filter, signal output, to the signal input of the VCA. And then we have something that's controlling, look here, control inputs, something that's controlling the VCA. And if I follow that patch cord, it takes me to a multiple, and let's see what's in there. It's the envelope generator. So this sound has one envelope generator, 2 oscillators, 1 filter, 1 envelope generator. Still very simple, a lot of patch cords, a bit of tracking to follow the patch, but not that complicated. Output of the envelope generator now goes into this multiple so that I can send the envelope generator to 2 places. So the first place I'm sending it is to, let's follow this cable, up here. Why am I going up here? An attenuator. So I can control the amount of the envelope generator that's going to the VCF, which is the voltage control filter. So it's not going to be any brighter than I want it to be. See, I can set it where I want it to be. The other output that's coming from this multiple is the envelope generator that's controlling the VCA. And you can see that's opening and shutting the sound. Without it, this was a good thing for you to see because the sound plays whether or not I have the patch cord in. And the reason is because the envelope generator is normaled to the VCA. There are a couple things that are normaled on this instrument. So I want you to know that, but I patched it so that you could understand that this envelope generator, which is our only envelope generator, has to go to the filter and the VCA. And the way I accomplished that was taking the output of the envelope generator into the multiple, and then the 2 outputs of the multiple allow me to control the VCF and the VCA. And the one that goes to the VCF takes a little detour and goes up to this attenuator, as I showed you. And then you follow this cable all the way around into the VCF. The one last thing is an important thing because it allows you to be expressive with the sound. So This is something where Malcolm and Robert Margouleff made a special box for Stevie so he could do pitch bend and vibrato.
And Malcolm said, we got to do something about bending notes because we can't just, you can't play the blues if you can't bend the notes a little bit. You can't do good R&B. You can't do this kind of randomness.
It needs to talk.
You need something that's impulsive. So he took a model airplane controller, which, you know, is a little like a little joystick, and you could fly the plane. I guess now they do it with the drones. And But we took the joystick, and Malcolm figured it out. We put voltage controllers inside the box of the joystick, and we put rubber bands around the joystick, so when you let go of it, it would snap to 0.
Yep.
And one axis was pitch, and the other axis pitch sideways, and the vertical axis was filter.
Perfect. Yeah.
And that's, Stevie heard that, and Boogie on Reggae Woman is a good example of its use. But that happened at the record plant.
And that was done with a controller made from a model airplane?
Yeah, model airplane controller.
And then you can bend down, which you can't do on guitar.
You can bend down and up, yeah. Steve loved it, of course.
I'm going to do it using this oscillator at the top, which I've put it in low frequency mode, and it's a low frequency sine wave. So if I follow this cable down, you can see that the external input is receiving the low frequency sine wave. And that simply allows me to add vibrato. You can get vibrato this way by just patching a sine wave into the external input, and then this sends the voltage. And the way it gets to the oscillator is through this normal, which is another normal on this Moog, so you don't need a patch cord. And by having this button up, it's sending whatever's coming through this attenuator directly to the oscillator driver. And if you remember at the front of the video, I showed you that this oscillator driver controls the frequency of all 3 oscillators. So by just sending the vibrato to the driver, I don't have to send it to each of the oscillators because it's built in to the process here. And that covers everything except one thing. When I go up into the high range, I need the sound to get brighter but not too bright. So that's called keyboard control voltage. And I want the keyboard control voltage to track a certain way so that it's not too bright down there, but bright when I go up high. And let me show you how that's done. So this is the output where it says pitch, channel 1. That output sends voltage from the keyboard. So I'm going to follow the cable. Let's follow it all the way up to control voltages. And these are patching switches, and they patch to the filter. So essentially, I'm sending keyboard control voltage to this attenuator, and it's going, because button 4 is up, that means it's whatever's on this attenuator will be going to the filter over here. So let's go back to the attenuator, and you can see I can set the control voltage. So if I don't have any, so if I go up high on the keyboard, it's not very bright. But if I come on up and let's take a look at this attenuator now as I go up the keyboard. See how it's making it brighter? But when I go down low on the keyboard, it's not really changing it too much. And that allows me to have bassy low notes that aren't too bright and still bright high notes. Whereas the high notes would be like this, and I'd still have a bassy low note. This way I get a bassy low note and some brightness up here. And I can do things like this. Right up high, low on the bottom, and a little bit of expression. So there's our walkthrough on the big Moog IIIc. Take your time, understand it in the 4 basic sections: pitch, timbre, duration, amplitude, and then we have a little bit of control with the keyboard tracking and a little bit of expression with the vibrato. So be sure to do your best to copy the sound if you have a Moog Modular VST, but also the theory applies to any synth that you have. So don't be too rough on yourself. It's broken down in components, and if you make these sounds as close as you can, then you'll have what you need to tailor certain timings like decay time and filter brightness and vibrato speed and the amount of oscillators and the waveforms to the song that you're working on. Because that's what we're really trying to do, original songs, and understand the theory of what a good bass sound is and what tracking means, and so you can be expressive with it. So I hope you've enjoyed that overview of how to patch Stevie Wonder Superstition bass on the Moog IIIc. And the reason I did it here is because that's my understanding from the producers, Malcolm Cecil and Robert Margouleff. So if you go to our video titled Producing Stevie Wonder and the Synth That Changed Music, you'll get a full description of the synthesizers that were used and which ones are part of T.O.N.T.O and which ones were not part of T.O.N.T.O. And there was no Minimoog in T.O.N.T.O, and that comes up a number of times. And I was just kind of awestruck by it. And Robert is really clear that there was no Minimoog. So we made it on the 3C, and I think I noticed that there are some very specific characteristics of this big Moog that are different than a Minimoog, like especially the harmonic saturation. We're going to go over to the Minimoog, and I'm going to show you how to do it there. Before I go there, please remember to visit AnthonyMarinelliMusic.com, because we have exclusive free content there. You can sign up for the mailing list, be a part of what we're building. We're looking forward to having some live streams on there where we can have two-way communication between all of you. So it's out there for you. Let's go over to the Minimoog, and I'm going to make that Stevie Wonder Superstition sound over there so that you can see something a little more familiar. Now let's take a look at how to make this Superstition bass sound on a Minimoog. Simple sound, a lot less patching obviously. 2 oscillators, just like on the big Moog. I use a sawtooth and a square wave from oscillator 1, sawtooth, oscillator 2, square wave. They're tuned in unison into the mixer, full volume, so that I'm getting some of the harmonic saturation that mimics the big Moog. You need that. No keyboard control voltage, filter shut down, just like on the big Moog, just enough resonance to not lose bass, but also not to get too wowy, like that would be too wowy. That's full bass, so just get it to the right spot. The Minimoog allows you to push the resonance without losing bass right away. Contour determines how bright the sound is, so you don't want to be too bassy, but just enough to speak and give you some personality. The decay time is important. This is the decay for the amount of contour, so that's going to determine the time of the sound, how long the sound blooms. And then a little bit of sustain level. If I have no sustain level, there's nothing left, so you might want to make sure something's there. No attack time, and then we go to the VCA. No attack time in the VCA. The decay time is there a little bit for some bounce. Here's without decay time. So if I go, right, it's with decay, gives me some bounce to the sound. It makes it ring a little bit after I release my fingers. And then the sustain level of the VCA is full up. And then the last component is oscillator 3 is creating vibrato. So I have the modulation mix set to oscillator 3, so that's what's feeding the mod wheel. Low frequency, no tracking of the modulation oscillator, so that switch is there. And then about this many cycles per second, vibrato, triangle wave. Make the sound on the Minimoog, get close, and it's a great starting place for a lot of basses. And then you can tailor those functions to the sound that you're working on, because most likely you're not making a cover. So decay time is important for how long the sound takes to bloom. The brightness is the amount of contour right there. And the bounce comes from the decay time in the VCA, and it's turned on and off by this switch. Hope you like that one. Let's go back over to the Maximoog. So I'm back at the Maximoog. Hope you liked this video. Always remember to like and subscribe. And we're so glad that you're with us from week to week. We really look forward to sharing these videos with all of you. See you next time.